The morning in San Isidro always began gently, as if the town itself understood the weight people carried in their hearts. The sun rose slowly over palm trees, casting soft golden lines across narrow dirt roads. Roosters crowed in the distance. Laundry swayed quietly on old bamboo lines. Life moved at the pace of breath. In a small wooden house that leaned slightly to one side, Elias Rivera woke before the world fully opened its eyes. At 27, he carried a calmness that felt older than his age. His face showed the softness of someone who had endured much, yet still chose kindness every single day. He worked long shifts at a packaging factory, earning enough to survive but never enough to dream. But every dawn, before the noise of machines and deadlines swallowed him, he carved a few minutes for the one thing that made his heart feel alive: music. The small living room held a faded poster of Elvis Presley that his father had taped to the wall years ago. The corners had curled, and the colors had begun to disappear. But for Elias, it was more than a poster. It was a connection to the man who first taught him how music could heal even the tired soul of a tricycle driver. His father, Mang Arturo, had been the kind of man who smiled through exhaustion. He believed every person carried a gift, a light, a sound. And he always said Elias carried all three. But life had taken him too soon, leaving Elias with memories that sometimes felt sharp enough to cut. His mother, Luz, kept her strength quiet. She moved slowly through mornings, touching the poster as she passed by, the way one touches something sacred. To her, Elias's voice wasn't just talent, it was the last echo of her husband's dreams. Outside, neighbors greeted each other with half-sleepy waves. Inside, Elias stood barefoot on the cool floor, holding the small microphone his mother had gifted him years ago. The house wasn't perfect. It wasn't big. But when he sang, it transformed. In those minutes, before the world demanded anything from him, his voice filled the room like warm light. No stage. No applause. No cameras. Just a hidden voice, waiting to be discovered by the world that never expected him. The journey began long before the flight. It began the moment a stranger recorded Elias singing at a small barangay event, just him, a borrowed speaker, and a quiet smile that hid years of hesitation. The video traveled faster than he could understand, passed from one phone to the next, until it reached thousands, then millions. People he had never met started calling him the Filipino Elvis, a name that felt too big for someone who still helped his mother fold laundry in the afternoons. But the world, sometimes, chooses people without asking if they are ready. A local fundraiser was organized in the town plaza. Students brought coin boxes, tricycle drivers offered free rides, and elderly women shared what little extra they had. Everyone wanted one thing: to send Elias to America, to a stage none of them had ever seen in person but watched through cracked phone screens with hope in their eyes. When the day of the flight finally arrived, Elias stood at the airport holding a small backpack. Inside were only two treasures: his father's old belt buckle, the same one Mang Arturo wore during long nights on the road, and the modest microphone his mother gifted him back when singing was only a dream whispered in dimly lit corners of their home. Los Angeles greeted him with a different kind of light. Neon signs glowed like restless stars, and the air buzzed with voices moving too fast, too loud. The world felt bigger, heavier, almost overwhelming. Yet Elias walked slowly, trying to keep a piece of San Isidro inside his heart. At the AGT venue, performers filled the waiting lounge with sparkles, massive props, dramatic costumes, and teams of assistants rushing around. Elias sat quietly in a corner, holding his number card, watching the chaos swirl around him. To others, he looked like someone who didn't belong, just a humble man in simple clothes, carrying no equipment, no dancers, no spectacle. But the producers noticed something else. A softness. A sincerity. A calmness that felt rare in a room filled with noise. It was as if Elias wasn't trying to prove anything. He was simply carrying the hopes of a small town across an ocean. And sometimes, that is enough to change everything. The stage of America's Got Talent had a presence of its own, alive, electric, almost breathing. The arena lights shimmered like a sky full of artificial stars, and thousands of seats curved around the stage like an enormous heartbeat waiting to react. Elias stood behind the curtains, feeling the vibrations of footsteps, cheers, and whispers echoing through the floor. Every performer before him had brought something loud, flashy, bold. Their confidence had shaken the air. Their energy had filled the room like fire. He, on the other hand, carried nothing but a quiet breath and an old dream. As his name was called, he stepped forward slowly. The world in front of him opened into a vast sea of faces, curious, skeptical, unsure. The judges looked at him the way people look at a puzzle they're not sure they want to solve. The arena, once bursting with noise, began to settle into a gentle hush. He stood in the center of the stage, small and sincere, framed by lights that felt too bright for someone so humble. His hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of the weight of everything he carried, his father's memory, his mother's prayers, his town's hopes. People in the crowd exchanged glances. Some leaned back, waiting for another ordinary act. Others tilted their heads, trying to understand who this quiet man was and why he belonged on a stage built for spectacular moments. Even the judges looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. His appearance didn't match the confidence they were used to seeing. His simplicity felt out of place in a stage designed for stars. The atmosphere shifted into a stillness that bordered on cold. Then, the music started. A single note hung in the air, soft as the first drop of rain before a storm. Elias inhaled gently, as though gathering years of emotion into one fragile breath. And when he released it, when his first note rose into the vast arena, something invisible shifted. The judges leaned forward. The crowd froze mid-breath. Backstage performers stopped moving. His voice filled the air, deep, golden, unexpectedly powerful. It wasn't just singing. It was a soul opening. And in that moment, the entire arena fell silent. As if the world itself paused to listen. The moment Elias stepped fully into the rhythm of the music, something extraordinary awakened inside him. It was as if every memory, every struggle, every unspoken dream rose from his chest and flowed through his voice. The sound that filled the arena carried the warmth of old vinyl records and the rawness of a heart that had been waiting too long to be heard. His posture changed, not intentionally, but naturally, like a man finally stepping into the space he was always meant to occupy. The bright stage lights reflected off the faint sheen of sweat forming on his skin, painting him with a glow that felt almost otherworldly. He didn't try to imitate anyone. He didn't copy a legend. He simply allowed his own truth to rise, shaped by the echoes of Elvis yet unmistakably his own. The crowd felt the shift instantly. People who had been half-distracted moments earlier slowly rose in their seats, drawn by a force they couldn't explain. Some placed their hands over their hearts. Others whispered in disbelief as the notes grew stronger, sharper, more soulful. Backstage, performers who had been busy preparing their acts gathered around the screen, their eyes widening. They weren't watching another contestant. They were witnessing a moment that felt rare, something that only happens once in many seasons, when one voice changes the atmosphere of the entire show. The judges, known for their composure, began losing themselves in the performance. One leaned back with a hand over the mouth, another tapped their fingers gently against the table, unable to hide their awe. Even Simon's expression shifted into something rarely seen, an unspoken recognition that the stage had just been claimed by someone extraordinary. Elias pushed into the high notes with a strength carved from years of singing in small living rooms and open plazas. His voice didn't crack. It didn't waver. It soared, carrying the weight of his father's dreams and his mother's prayers with it. And when he reached the final line, the note stretched through the arena like a ribbon of light. It lingered in the air, trembling with emotion before settling into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The entire arena stood suspended between disbelief and wonder. Then the world erupted, an explosion of applause, cheers, and emotion so powerful it shook the cameras. The sound rose like a wave crashing against the walls of the arena, filling every corner with an electric roar. America had just witnessed something unforgettable. A moment that would replay across screens for years. A performance that reminded the world that greatness often comes from the quietest places. When the final echoes of the applause faded, Elias stood alone on the stage, breathing slowly, as if trying to steady the whirlwind that had just swept through his life. His chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm, and for the first time since stepping into America, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. The lights softened around him, no longer sharp or intimidating, they now felt warm, almost protective, as though the stage itself had accepted him. Backstage, the corridor buzzed with a kind of energy he had never felt before. Crew members moved toward him with smiles that carried genuine admiration. Performers he had never met reached out to pat his shoulder, unable to hide the glow in their eyes. His name, once spoken gently by only a few in his town, now traveled through the hallways with excitement, reaching ears that would remember it for a long time. Meanwhile, the judges gathered in quiet amazement, each silently processing the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Their reactions, captured by cameras, would soon spread around the world. Clips would be replayed, shared, dissected, and celebrated by millions. But in this moment, none of that mattered to Elias. He only felt a humble gratitude rising inside him, soft, steady, overwhelming. As he walked off the stage, the memory of his father washed over him like a familiar song. Mang Arturo's laughter, the late-night rides, the small moments of encouragement, they all returned in a wave that brought warmth to his eyes. He imagined his father sitting in the audience, smiling proudly, with tears of joy hidden in the corners of his vision. Across the ocean, in their small home in San Isidro, Luz sat surrounded by neighbors who had gathered around a single television. The wooden walls seemed to vibrate with emotion as the final high note played. She pressed her hand against her chest, overwhelmed by the sight of her son standing tall under the brightest lights in the world. The tears she wiped away were not of sorrow, they were the kind that come from witnessing a promise fulfilled. News outlets soon began calling Elias a phenomenon. Online audiences named him the Filipino Elvis who revived the magic. His performance climbed charts, broke timelines, and captured hearts everywhere. But beneath all the noise, Elias remained the same gentle soul, quiet, grateful, and grounded. His life had changed, but his spirit stayed humble. He didn't chase fame. He carried gratitude. And as he stepped out of the arena, bathed in the cool night air of Los Angeles, he realized something profound. Sometimes, the world does not look for the loudest dreamers. Sometimes, it notices the quiet ones. And lifts them higher than they ever imagined.